happen again to the internet.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Is it? I don't know if I missed anything, but is it okay if I continue where I was?
Yeah, the Glenn only just had some clarification.
Wait a minute. Yeah, the only thing. Yeah, I'll make you host. Okay, now you are host again, Martin. Yeah, the only thing I wanted to clarify was that the point that I made earlier was that I think that when humans are the most happy, it is the moments when we feel connected with nature. That is certainly not always the case. So just to clarify that point.
Yeah, and what do those people do? The ones that are not that don't crave or seek out, right? And even know that it's a form of medicine instead of going to see the doctor. So what do we do with those people? Do we sell nature at Costco and they'll go buy some there? So it's pretty sad in that respect. So what I was saying is about people cutting trees, right? There's plenty of people that would take work to cut trees. Now that work is not for just food because they don't have a food, or a shower because they don't have a plate. I haven't taken a shower in 4 days. I hope so today, but it's not guaranteed. So, you know, what do these people want that job to cut trees for? Well, they want a big truck, a newer big truck. They want to pop out babies without necessarily learning parenting skills. They want to buy a big house. They want to go on vacation here. They want to have a mistress sometimes too. They want to get a motorcycle they're going to ride and kill themselves with, you know, and take out more trees as they crash in the woods. So it's pretty silly that that's what it is. Now, the people that would not be able to cut a tree because it would break their heart, would these people buy a house made from trees and start a family where, again, these babies would not develop a human operating system because they don't value intelligence? Yes, that's the case. So again, connecting to reality, Glenn, I understand your point of view. We are so far from having that become reality again. What you believe and you're hopeful is what is possible. Because again, these are the same conversations every proto-society that's about to crash has, right? It's the hopefulness. But again, reality, the data doesn't point that as a majority, we do this. As a majority, we are compromising everything for the status quo, and it includes our children's future. So that's what it is. So I'm sorry I have to disagree. Now I have more things to talk about, but I'll wait for my turn again next time. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just briefly add that I'm not at all sure about that, because I think the reality as a whole is vastly more complex than any one of us are capable of seeing. But what does seem to be the case is that there are at least many examples of people who exist relatively in a connection with nature, and that this certainly seems to help them a great deal in terms of mental health and probably just intelligence, as is the topic, that it makes people more intelligent when they can have a closer connection with nature. But there seems to be many degrees of connection with nature, and I think we all agree that we are very far away from the level of connection which we would want to have, and the harmony as well with the systems around us. But in terms of exactly how far we are away from the ideal thing, I think it's very, very difficult to determine, because there's so much bias, and there's a negativity bias as well as in our culture. There's an enormous doomsday prophecy culture on the internet that continuously channels only negative news. And so we have to be very critical of our assumptions if we're going to generalize. That's all. I'm just not convinced about that mode. Yeah.
Glenn, I believe in reality, and reality is doom and gloom. Okay, that's what it is. And yet I've said in previous posts how I can find hope and what hope looks like.
How can you say reality is gloom and doom? That's an assumption you're making. That's an interpretation that you're projecting onto the world of doom and gloom.
Yes. For example, if I heard in the news that people pick up litter left in nature, I'm going to say nature is not something we paved over, let's say, is the quantity of littering that people leave when they're out in nature is amazing. Like every volunteer will collect a bag that is incredibly heavy. So that for me, it's reality. It wasn't put there just so this organization can have money and fake it. They didn't put the littering there the night before and pick it up. So that's reality I cannot ignore. I cannot ignore that some people go in nature to commit crimes against others or to do things that are harmful for their brains, the intelligence topic we're picking up with the drugs they're doing. And it's very disrespectful to nature and to other members of nature, such as their own species, what they're doing in the woods. And yet they'll come back and say how they love being in the woods. This is reality. It's measurable. I can't discount that. Irina, perhaps you should speak now. We can't do fisticuffs, me and Glenn, because we're too far away.
It's not all of reality. That's the point, Martin. It's a collection of items that you choose to focus on. There's a large part of the forest that I walk in. Almost all of that forest is unlittered. There's a little bit of littering, a little bit here and there. 99% of the forest areas that I walk in, there's not litter. That's a fact.
That's a fact for your local area, Glenn,
yes.
And for the philosophy and culture around your area, okay? But your country also are big in oil, okay? So they might make their neighborhoods look nice, and it's a way to distract and keep people happy while they are one of the main destroyers of the planet. So again, if we got to be global in our answers. And again, the hope is there and your medicine is there, and go get it. And I wish you'd invite me to go walk there with you, but I have to talk about every type of data added up together when I speak. And that again is linked to connection with reality. I can't pick and choose little pieces there and make myself feel good. Now it doesn't feel good what I know, but it came in increments, right? I didn't suddenly have somebody plug a wire in my brain, suddenly reality caught in and my brain didn't overload and I'm one of the survivors. That's not how it worked. Is eventually you develop critical thinking skills. Eventually you become more objective about the human condition. Eventually you fight off denial and the data comes in and it comes in. But I have a hopeful side. I have that glass is partly full. And again, there is hope, but the hope has nothing to do with the status quo. It's a total change.
Yeah. Well, what if the data is fundamentally biased? Fundamental negativity bias in the data that we receive through the news continuously.
I'll let Irina answer that, because Irina does also collect a lot of data and eventually it adds up, right? That she can't deny things, right? Irina, you want to go for that one?
Yeah, I just want to a little bit balance, I think, the sides. So I guess we need to, I do agree that probably we need to lock our frame of reference of what kind of, actually, where does this crisis, everyone here would agree that we are in the existential crisis, environmental, actually ecological crisis. How does it bake, right? Where does it come from? And it's probably easy to say that people, they just have no whatever is called natural intelligence or even heart to cut trees. But if you look at the roots of the problem, why they do that? They do that because they have no choice to survive and to put food on the plate. And it's all plugged into the monetary system, which is profit oriented, which is the consumption is a core of the system, and growth at the core of the system. As long as you have the growth at the core of the system, you will overshoot the habitats where you are living. if that's the habitat of the civilization that used to collapse, because actually one of the main reasons was the ecological overshoot at a certain place of the world. So now we build a global civilization, and it's been overshoot globally. So, but if you look at the core of the problem is that at the root of the system, how the system is run, and it's run and based on the consumption, right? So if we individually blame people like for cutting the trees, I don't think we really are addressing the core, because the core is not individual people who just, you know, probably this is the only skill they have. They also have to feed their families, to put the food on the plate. Everyone in the system thinking on how to survive, because we are the animals, you know, it's just a survivability instinct. And I do know I watched the documentaries of loggers who gave up that job, even though it was really hard for them, because they started to feel that this is really not only ethical, this is really insensible thing to do. But of course, it seems to me that even if you look at the poor countries and you see why people make deforestation there, is to survive. They just simply need to survive. So, and why do they then commit what's called commit deforestation, is to create enough resources and capability and food for normally for the more wealthy countries. So I think this is already not the topic of their naturalist intelligence somewhat, but it's more the topic of them how the world and society is run, what the core roots of our, you know, like this ecological crisis, I would say, pollution, which is makes up pollution and deforestation and climate change. These are all the symptoms of the bigger crisis, and the bigger crisis is our core system, the society, how it's run. It's run as the profit oriented. And we can talk a lot about, you know, how to change individuals, but if we don't address the crisis systematically at the many levels, at the level of governments, the level of education, and that must be also the level of what we see on TV, how much nature gets promoted versus promotion of soccer game. You know, there is a huge disbalance in that, right? That people prefer to watch soccer. Why? Rather than versus hang out in the nature. Why? Because it's all on TV, because it's all ingrained. The advertisement is ingrained in consumption, and that's what people see. Monkeys see, monkeys do, right? So I think this is, and I also agree with Glenn that, you know, just I know that there is a rigid data that the situation is actually quite not so positive, and we need to take the facts, and if even we don't like them, but we should not just kind of like get into the despair of, like Glenn mentioned, of negativity. And I don't think that Glenn mentions that it's just hope. It must be hope with action, not just bare hope. That's how I see it for me, right? So I was just kind of like trying to balance both sides. I both agree with you, but I mean, we need to look at the root of the problem, and probably in order to talk about that. And our topic is a little bit off, right? We could kind of like, let's stick a little bit more to naturalist intelligence, and probably we can jump to the next question: is how does deviating from nature suppress naturalist intelligence, and the other way around, right? How does connecting to nature, maybe we can talk about what it means deviating from nature versus connecting to nature, and how does connecting to nature develops natural intelligence. So if we can look at this, like as more we deviating from nature, as more we suppressing our naturalist intelligence, as more we connect into nature, as more we develop natural intelligence. So I was just trying to see if you guys see these connections, this relationship.
Glenn, before you answer, can I put in a question for both of you, and you can maybe add that as part of your responses if you want? And by the way, Irina, if you're trying to create a divide or a balance, I disagree, because that's going to disconnect us from reality. And eventually we're going to talk about the type of intelligence that is managing our own triggers. So that's our responsibility. We shouldn't help others too much with that, because that's something they have to develop on their own, right? This is not like a group session, or the moderator shouldn't, try to find a balance that becomes unscientific. So let me ask you this then. If we all agree that there is healing and there's a connection to nature, then, and we speak and we feel a spirituality as part of who we are. And even people that are religious, if you ask the right questions, you eventually get to the point that nature is what they appreciate. They just reference it as their Christian creator, but really it goes back. That's the common spirituality. So I've been trying to, in my hope, teach an ecocentric worldview. Nobody's joined in 3 years. So I've sent many invitations, and I continue to do it. That's data, that's measurable data that people are disconnecting more and not less. And there's also a phenomenon where Irina, when I first met you, you were more doom and gloom, and I'm not promoting doom and gloom, I'm promoting reality. And I noticed that when people get older, a higher percentage of them need to see the glass half full more, and they need, if they don't have despair, dealing with despair tools. And Mia, you would think, my God, with what Martin is saying, he must have overwhelming despair. I do not. I used to, but I developed the tools where I can deal with this reality. And again, it's linked to many different things. So I'm asking you guys, I'm not even sure what the question is going to be anymore, but do you guys realize that at the root of everything, like, where we would get our environmental values is a worldview? And do you realize that we are all still using language that shows we are very far from that? Our language shows a lot of human chauvinism, and it actually talks about the divide when there's no divide. Our language creates that divide between nature and us when we are nature. And developing a worldview that I've been trying to promote for years, it would actually change that language. It would change the programming, because it's very hard after being an adolescent to change this programming up here. It's very confused up here. So what do you guys think about this? What do you guys think about even our own language here? Even our own inabilities to deal with despair is compromising our discussion about this type of intelligence.
Yeah, okay, I can respond to that. Yeah, I definitely also had the experience that certain kinds of language create a false separation between me and the world, or me and nature, or human and nature, and that creates this divide, and that it creates this disconnection. So that goes back to this question. I'll try to tie this in a little bit with the theme of natural intelligence. What I would say then is that if we really want to connect with reality, which I think all of us want to do, certainly want to do it, connect with nature. So I'm wondering, what does that actually mean? And one of the things that occurs to me is that nature is enormously huge. Reality is big. It's enormous. It's way, way, way bigger than me. What does it mean then to have an intelligent, realistic relationship to something that's way bigger than me, and out of which I've appeared? I will have to have the capability of an enormous humility, a sense of not generalizing from a subjective point of view and try to pretend that point of view to represent something universal. And that actually connects back with what was mentioned about science, where the scientific method is based on this ability to question one's own assumptions. So if I have an assumption, I want to be able to consider it as an assumption, perhaps, maybe as a working hypothesis, but then to be able to step outside of it for a moment and question whether my assumption is the right one. And this was the assumption that was mentioned earlier: positivity bias, negativity bias. I'm strongly questioning these biases because my experience is that the sources of information that I receive about these questions do not seem reliable. And if I, for example, see the news, there's an extreme negativity bias in the news. If I see advertising of different kinds, there's a certain version of extreme positivity bias. So there's very biased information sources. And this is where, I'll tie this back to natural intelligence, then I'll wrap this in. The reason I mention this is maybe natural intelligence has something to do with an ability to exist in uncertainty and be able to act intelligently in uncertainty without buying into these simple stories that pretend to represent a reality that's actually is vastly more complex than I know. Yeah.
Glenn, I just wanted to point out that you mentioned a positive socio-cybernetic feedback loop. Now that reality, let's say about the natural world or wars, people are more aware of it because of the internet. That is the negativity that they have no choice to show, right? It's the reality that more people have seen as fact and not, an hypothesis. It's a fact that there's changes in climate and there's wars going on. So then the business world, the consumeristic world, is putting more positivity. You'll feel this way with this car going into nature. So it's balancing that out because they can't hide too much of how the business and the consumption is destroying the planet. So they're showing some negativity, but then they're popping the positivity into ads and marketing and get more of this that's been destroying the planet. So that's a positive socio-cybernetic feedback loop. And that would anger me when I see it, right? I've done vlogs where I say, man, I'm watching this video on Greta and there's an ad about an airline. That pisses me off. Now, again, people need to realize this is happening instead of fantasizing suddenly. That's not what Greta said, but suddenly, oh man, that would be nice going there on that trip. And it's unconscious mind. They don't even know they've just been manipulated. So this kind of manipulation is getting worse. So we pointed that out, that as more people connect to reality, they're going to keep being more part of the problem, though, because instead of developing a good balance of different types of intelligence and getting their hope somewhere else, their hope is actually an escape from reality by going on this vacation. And that's not hope. Hope will only manifest in a better future if we connect with reality more.
And how do we connect with reality more then? Does that mean do you agree, Martin, with me then that that a part of connecting with reality would be to question all of the information we receive on the internet, let's say, or in the news, because I feel that all of that information is so biased, it goes through so many layers of bias, that if I want to connect with reality, I have to actually go to the sense impressions of the moment to things I know from personal experience. I can't depend on stories I hear on the internet.
Well, here's an example of something I said in a previous blog. If I'm watching a story from a journalist in a different country, I'm really not necessarily listening to their manufacturing of consent towards me. I'm looking in the background. I'm studying how people are driving there, how people are treating each other. So that allows me to study that culture by just having that cameraman and the journalist in that other country. And I'm ignoring their brainwashing, which they don't even know they're doing. They think they're doing a great job and they don't realize that there is harm in what they believe is good. So that's an example. But Glenn, that's a big, big thing that you just brought up. And I don't want to answer that right away, but I'm glad you brought it up, because at some point we could do a series on critical thinking and say, hey, this is a common current affairs theme. Let's address it. Let's review some of the media. And I think we would all have this ability here. And we would show a clip of it as this conversation, and then we would see through this brainwashing and teach people how to do it. So, and that's very important. And there's hope in that. Hope is more people like Glenn saying, no reliable information. I want it, I just can't find it, or it's hard to get. And then they get canceled when I find a place like that. So that is hope right there. People are awakening, saying, holy crap, we're being brainwashed. Irina, I still have a list of things I want to say from before, but you've been, you don't have to just look nice on your couch. You have some important things.
Yeah, I just would like to address the question, how do we see the reality? I do agree, just to complement a little bit to what Glenn mentioned, that reality is so complex that, assuming that one human's perception is capable of grasping in even a tiny piece of it is just, it's just a matter of arrogance. I think this is just human arrogance. I think it's what needs to be addressed, or what we could do. We first need to ask the question, what we as a human, if we talk about individuals, as it seems to be the topic is, like leaning towards the individual as individuals, what we can do as individuals. Like personally for me, probably I could share some of it, and this again is going to be purely subjective perception of how I attempt to recognize what is real and what is not real. Is first of all, I don't watch news already for many years, unless it's independent media. I don't follow the mainstream. I follow the mainstream just to see, okay, how away it is from reality. And secondly, just turning to the rigid science, training your mind how to read science, how to read scientific papers that has been previewed is one of their, fact check that everyone can train yourself. But again, because it's not so really ingrained in our educational system, yes, a few individuals could do that. A few individuals could learn how to read the data, how to analyze the data, probably some data geeks or science geeks like me. But it, again, is so few people, because we cannot just put this responsibility on individuals as individuals dealing with that, because it's going to take for a few people like us probably a million gazillion years to address that. So again, this also needs to be addressed systematically at the level of addressing the issue from like a societal issue. And so if you train more businessmen, which is like, one of the most popular, professions in college is businessmen, or engineers who design equipment for consumption-based society, then you will end with those kind of consequences, right? If your college system or your school system is all oriented to protecting nature, to learning about nature, to read the science, to understanding science, then you will get a completely different society. So again, we're getting back to the issue of education, right? And this
Irina,
is in our education.
Irina, in an effort to do 90 minutes and stick to the topic, let me ask you this, because you said,
okay.
you said, Irina, something that, and I'm sorry if I seem arrogant or domineering today, but this is an important topic, and I want us to be honest with each other and challenge each other, because we need to role model this, because we're all separate identities. Glenn, remember a conversation we had in the past, it said that you know, if we need to start with our own reality, who we are, how our brain is functioning well or not, and how, you know, the complexities of us work, because we can't even understand the outside of us complexity unless we have a good frame of reference, which is understanding ourselves. Big part of why we're doing this series on intelligence. Irina, when you say we need to do this, we need to change this, let me ask you this. Do you believe it's going to happen, that we will change these things? And do you believe it's not too late? Answer this in a very short way, because then if you don't believe it's going to happen, we have to start saying, we have to stop saying we need to do this, when even a part of our brain says, I don't really believe. If I'm asking myself, or somebody I trust is asking me, I don't really believe, because I don't believe that the changes to the education system, based on my own research, and it's in different countries as well, that we are going to make that shift. I do not believe that. And again, my hope is in mitigation. But do you believe mitigation of the future that's coming? Because people keep having kids and they think they have no choice, but they have a choice. So Irina, do you believe that these changes of less, let's say, business programs, more environmental programs, teaching at a younger age, are the right thing? Do you think our species will succeed in doing this?
I don't know if that succeed or not. What I was trying to say, individual people as us, understanding and role modeling like this, are not really enough. And you need to have a butterfly effect in order to have these individuals to change to at least into the percentage. I forgot what kind of percentage is that. 6% or what's that, or 4% of population, and then that could be triggered in the butterfly effect based on the theory, which is also was really applicable to revolutions and all this
So
stuff.
do you believe, yes or no, that's our future, that we will suddenly have an educated global populace as a majority in the right things, in the right way, in the right timing, that it's not too late?
Whose future? My personal future or the humanity's future?
Whatever you want to choose as a point of reference. Do you believe that is the more
I am
likely
asking
future?
you to frame your question in a
Well, let's stick to the biosphere. Do you believe, for the sake of the biosphere, our species will succeed in this suddenly with some sort of miracle? Because we've been talking about it, and even experts have been talking about it, and it doesn't happen with miracles. It happens with a majority of people doing a lot of work.
Kind of a species, like, are you talking about the species itself as humans, or are you talking about the way of living as industrial civilization? You need to frame your, you need to lock your frame of reference.
Yes, both, except that I don't call us humans, but yes, both.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Can you lock your frame of reference? Because it's hard to answer. If you're talking about the species itself, I think probably some species, like a part of a species survivable in the future, probably survivable, as we are very adaptable, survivable animals. But as a civilization, is based on the data, I think it will collapse later or sooner.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying no. Okay, you don't believe.
I want to say I liked your first answer much better, your immediate answer, which was I don't know. That's my answer. I don't know, and I think none of us knows, and that's true. that's
No,
the
but I was
first
just
thing I
like
want to say.
trying to make like leaning towards the answer, because Martin pushed for the definite answer.
Yeah,
I don't know actually, but if
Okay,
I'm just
let me
leaning
change.
towards-
but I want to add something more to that, and that is that there's another aspect to this issue, and that is that, and I actually wrote quite a lot about this in the commentary to this conversation that I posted in our group. And I think it's a very important point. And that is that if we frame this question as if we are passive spectators that sit on the outside, then I think we are fundamentally irresponsible in how we approach this. Because this question is undecided. It's undecided.
Okay,
So
can I ask you guys, this? Okay, so if we don't say we're sure it's not going to happen, we're not going to do what's needed to start having the right kind of naturalistic intelligence so we can survive on this planet. If the answer is no or yes or in the middle is if we don't know. I'm telling you, like pretty much I hope Glenn is saying now, is we should not be having kids if we don't know about the future. That is cruel and unusual punishment. And Irina, of course, it's hard for you to say you believe this because part of your work is education in this way. But even though I believe this, I would still continue the education in this way because it's the right thing to do. And I can only have my identity be part of the solution. So, and again, if there is possibilities of alternate, realities where on Earth we can be certain there's a good future coming based on the science, and then it would be okay. But right now, whether we don't think there's a good future or we're uncertain is both answers. I would say before somebody has a parent, they would be a bad parent if they have a child with an uncertain future or believing, yeah, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
But
what do you guys think?
But surely you aren't saying that it's necessarily bad to have children. If you can educate the children well, if you can give them a good upbringing, that could be a contribution, couldn't it?
Ask Irina. Irina, if I had a kid and you had a kid and we both taught them to have a worldview that is ecocentric from an early age, do you believe they would likely have a good life? Do you remember they'd be 1 in a million? Very few people would be like them. They wouldn't have a lot of friends. They wouldn't be popular if they express themselves. They would have to hide part of their identity to blend in. So I believe that's pretty cruel, even though I would successfully be, hoping to teach them the right behaviors and the right kind of worldview to have the right kind of environmental values.
There's many assumptions there that I don't agree with.
Okay.
But before you answer, Irina, I should probably finish the point that I started, just to make sure why I'm saying it this way. I think there's a lot of assumptions that we can make. For example, that a person who is ecocentric will be unpopular. I don't think so at all. I think that if you're ecocentric and you can do so in the right way, you will have enormous possibilities of connecting with huge numbers of people and doing very good in the world. So if somebody were to have kids and could give them a good upbringing, that could be, in my opinion, a very good contribution to a better future. Now, I don't have any kids myself, and maybe I won't have any. I mean, I probably might be going in a different direction, but I want to return to this point because it's so crucial. The future is undecided. The same with the education system. Is it possible that a naturalistic intelligence could grow and emerge in humanity? Yes. See a lot of signs of it. Will it happen by itself? No. Is it certain that it's going to happen? No. Are there a million ways things could go wrong? Of course. are we in a position to be able to predict what the future will be? This is the core of my argument. I think that the predictive approach is fundamentally flawed because it makes us passive, and it brings in all kinds of assumptions. It brings in assumptions that the future is predestined, pre-decided. And I just don't see any evidence that the future is predestined. That approach leaves out the whole element of choice, of willful choice, which I think is crucial in order to be able to improve this. And that this ties back into the question which came up earlier about the education system, and that could even include the informal education system, of which even conversations like these might be considered to be a part of the general sort of ecosystem of knowledge and information transfer around the world. And this is a very big topic in itself. The informational ecosystem, I think, is a good way of putting it, which I certainly think that there are some very big problems, enormous problems, which obviously means that there should be enormous opportunities if those problems can be solved or at least improved. And there also, it's not going to happen by itself. I just want to, make that point. So.
Yeah, thanks for that. I just, I would say, I would say that I don't really agree with that people who are advocate for ecocentrism are getting certainly unpopular. I think that this concept, of course, is very fresh and new, and I am myself, I also advocating for that. I have the website that is oriented, but it depends. I think that what I observe and being involved in the environmental movements myself, and organizing events, and also, learning about the stuff and so on, I see that there are more and more, people and more demand for that. Of course, it's probably not the demand from corporations or even from universities, but I would say there is more curiosity from the general public, and you can see by the number of membership in those projects that it's expanding. So I think that this is a trend, but at the same time, I would agree that it's not expanding at the speed which is which should be expanded, because I think we are falling with all our awareness as a global awareness of the global situation, systematically at the level of their majority. I would say we fall really, really far behind. We're doing it very slowly. And, the core reasons I think I already mentioned why, because let's say a song from Beyonce is a million times more popular than the conversation about the environment, So I think, I would just compliment with that. But I would agree that because the reality is very complex, we can predict that we can, of course, make scientific predictions of what's going on with a particular factor in the particular environment. Either it's like the global temperature rise or the sea level rise, all these indicators, or the ecological collapse, which is not really looking positively. I've done pretty much a good analysis and talks on that, but but extrapolating how it will affect the fate of humanity is very complex prediction. I don't think that even anyone is dealing with that, but we can make prediction about specific factors and specific indicators, but systematically. So why systems analysis is so hard is because it's somewhat a reflection of the reality and probably the projections into the future, but doing this at the levels of systems and evolution of society or evolution even of the species, it's quite hard. And I would also agree that I would say that it's quite hard to estimate even for scientists, not even, you know, I would make any attempt. So yeah, I would just compliment on that.
Thank you. Guys, you can probably see this back here, right? I do not promote this. I'm drinking coffee right now because I ran out of the medicine that I've been taking for maybe 10 years that helps regulate my sleep and make me more productive, like let's say in the morning. I ran out and I've tried to get on this medicine. I mean, to get off a few times and see if my brain could compensate, and it did not. But this time I ran out and I gave up on getting a prescription again, because for me, it's a drug pusher, it's a drug dealer kind of medical culture here, and I'm sick of it. And now I'm realizing that my brain has finally, because you know, a few times I ran out just because I was traveling, or I just didn't have the money, or I just didn't have a doctor. And this, you know, and it didn't work. My brain couldn't compensate. And now I'm noticing it's compensating. Now, if it's compensating, you know, it's still learning to be more resilient and more functional. Now I am drinking coffee, but I also notice that I'm not that dependent on it, and that I will be able to get off of this and train my brain to be better. I just want to say I'm not promoting coffee as I'm drinking it. It's just a phase because I'm off this medicine, and now I'll be off of the coffee soon, and I'll tell you guys about it. So Irina, you mentioned about joining environmental movements. When I've interviewed people, let's say of the Green Party in Canada, or outside here, I interviewed people that were doing something, and I posted it as one of my Master of Science and Ecocentric Worldview vlogs. And I can tell they are incredibly far from having an ecocentric worldview. So Glenn, I respect you. And Glenn, I think we're on the same page with a lot of things compared to most people I know. But
Green
I want
Party
to
is
say,
not an environmental movement, just by the way, just I want to make it clear. Green Party is not an environmental movement, and they just have the label of green. I'm talking about the environmental movement, which are for deep ecology, like the Extinction Rebellion against the industrial civilization.
yeah,
Just to make it clear, right? I'm not like a Green Party something members, okay.
Yeah,
you kind of seem to be attaching this label to me, so I don't want for the audience to think so.
yeah, and thank you for clarifying. And Glenn, I mean, there was the leader. There was a guy that's very popular related to deep ecology in Norway that was part of politics before, right? But did that grow or did that die out, right? So Irina, guys,
well,
can I just finish what the point that I
yeah.
was making? So Irina, thank you for saying that. And yes, I did notice in the news, I think it was in London, Extinction Rebellion scientists getting arrested. And that's good that the scientists are doing it, because they have power a little bit more, because the government will need scientists, so they'll get them out of jail. So it's good that they're finally walking the talk. But again, these documents, the UN are saying, oh, it's worse than we thought, what's coming. But even the data that the scientists are compiling, they have their positivity bias, and I could pick it up. So you got to like almost do ×3 of what they're saying. It's that bad. Now, Glenn, what I was saying before is I really respect you, and you're one of my favorite people to talk to. And even when we disagree, it's very respectful. So when I say this, I don't want you to believe I took it personally or I'm incredibly triggered, but I want to say that I take offense that you believe that there are people out there, or it's that easy to develop an ecocentric worldview. And the reason for that is both of you guys, I would say, have no clue how different your lives or the lives of people who truly, truly have an ecocentric worldview would look like and how challenging that would be living in this day and time. Now, if you don't believe me, take my course and we'll dig really deep into it and we'll change the programming, and you will see that that's a place that you guys do not want to go, because you will feel very alienated to even people you think are your favorites in environmental movements. You don't have to answer that if you want, but that's what I want to say.
Let me say, are you really saying that an ecocentric worldview will get you alienated?
Guys, do you realize that an ecocentric worldview does not put your species first? Do you realize that? Do you realize when you start talking this way, like I am, do you realize that you will? Yeah,
I would say that an ecocentric worldview puts our species as part of a larger ecosystem, but certainly it will value our species. And if there is a worldview that tries to put humans down and try to make us seen as evil or despicable creatures, that has nothing.
Let's go with clueless. Let's go with clueless.
That's different. But if we had a worldview which was anti-human, that has nothing to do with ecocentric, in my view. That is as far from ecocentric as you can get, because we're a part of this ecosystem.
So again, I don't know if we should go into this. We're going to have a big disagreement here. And this is where we can tell the difference between an ecocentric worldview and an anthropocentric worldview. And yes, I have enough data. You guys would have enough data too, to show that our species is anti-life on this planet. So having an ecocentric worldview would be able to discuss this and say, we need to develop an exiting strategy for our species as part of mitigation ventures. I've been there for a few years. Guys, let me just talk about a few things because we don't have a lot of time and I'm not sure what's going to happen. And Glenn, we can have even a part 2 of naturalistic intelligence based on ecocentric worldviews at another time. Guys, when Irina said people have no choice for things, I strongly disagree with this. And I understand their frame of reference. But again,
did she say that? No choice?
Well, like people have no choice to have kids or to do this for a paycheck to feed their kids. There's there's a lot of things that I disagree with there. And again, it's part of the us repeating what the business world wants to. And I don't. Now, Canada, do you know that Canada uses the monetary paradigm like the countries you're in use? Do you know that I'm able to see how the monetary paradigm is very much linked to a slavery system? That's what it is. A monetary paradigm is meant to make slavery easier. Canada's like this. And I'm not again saying it's the worst country in the world, but as immigrants or refugees for climate or political move around, I tell you, Canada is going to take advantage of this slavery system in immigration. This is all it is. It's really at the root of the monetary paradigm is easier slavery. And again, I can hear this between the lines of people talking that are sure they're good people talking about great things.
That's a whole big topic. Guys, I just have to tell you that I might be falling off soon because there's a little battery here. But I just briefly want to say I would make a distinction between one can love humans as a species while viewing our current behavior as insane. And I think that's the resolution to this issue that you bring up.
Yes, we can love our species like any other species. We can be extremely disappointed in our species and talk about it and explain it in very good ways. And we could also describe how people are clueless, including the people that you're having a conversation with at any time, who have understood something and they answer like they understood, and yet they will make the choice to be part of the problem. Again, that's pretty clueless. If you don't want to say evil, that's pretty clueless. They don't realize they're part of the problem, or that they lack the motivation or courage or strength of character or balance of intelligence to even want to start shifting towards being part of the solution. Yes, I can do this and love my species at the same time, which is probably why I cry many times a week. But the crying doesn't send me in despair that makes my brain dysfunctional. It just releases the reality that I know I'm a part of. And yet I hug people a lot. They're surprised I hugged them. They think there's something wrong with my brain because I talk about reality. No, I'm capable of love for my own species. But yes, I would prefer to hug a dog than most members of my species because, you know, it has to feel genuine, right? It has to be the connection is there. There's a real friendship or there's real care and concern for each other back and forth. That's not very observable in my own species.
Okay, guys, I think that because there is time, so we have to wrap up this conversation and decide if we, you know, whatever want to make next
It's
one.
good we're not in the same room, right? We're in different countries, so we don't go like this when we disagree. I love you, Glenn. I love you, Irina. I do. And I look forward to the next time. And thanks for showing up today because it was very hard for me to do everything I needed to do to show up today.
Wow, glad you showed up. So, do you have any last words, Irina?
Yeah, we didn't cover all the questions, but I guess so that so probably you just, you know, stick to their to some other time to talk about that. And yeah, also thanks for coming up today. So.
Glenn, do you have a few final last words, and I'll have a few final last words?
Okay. Yeah. Well, obviously, it's a very big topic. Yeah. I feel that we covered question 1 and 2. Are we trying to save the planet or the opportunity to live on this planet? Well, I would say that I would like both. I think that this planet and humans living harmoniously on it would be a really great thing. And that should be, I would view it as possible, but I don't think it will happen by itself. It's not a given. It's a complex situation. So I felt that we came into complexity today, and I'm happy we did that because it's very important. And I think that we kind of put a stake in the ground to look at the informational ecosystem. And that's a sort of an overarching issue that's connected with this. So yeah, awesome. We came into some really deep waters, and it's an enormous topic. So
thanks, Glenn. Irina, I want to say that the questions were great. And I'm not disappointed whether we went there or not. I'm happy that the conversation manifested the way it did. And the fact that it came back to worldviews again, I think is very appropriate with this topic. And of course, you know, we didn't prepare a specific explanation for people. This was a conversation for us on the template of this. And I'll add comments, and you guys can add comments to maybe define this intelligence in our own ways as individuals and see and compare them.
Okay. So I think Martin fell off there for a moment.
He probably is off again.
Okay. Well, yeah, you fell out for a few moments there. Okay. Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, and the recording continues if the internet connection is not broken for so long. So I forget what I was going to say, and I had more things, but I just want to say that it's normal that this is heated on this topic, and it's normal that we disagree on how to define what an ecocentric person would be behaving like. But I'm going to tell you one thing. If I meet the elusive Homo sapien, one way to evaluate them by behaviors will be that they will largely be in opposition to the behaviors of the norm. And they will not be silent about it because they have sentience and sapience. Now, they will learn skills where they could disagree and sometimes know they have to walk away or suggest things or educate or whatever they can, but they will not be a popular person. And the reason for that is we live in a reality that is really on a catastrophic path. So if we accept this, an Homo sapien, based on the norm that has created this catastrophic path will be in opposition, will not be somebody where they can, you know, sell out a theater as a speaker most of the time, right? Unless something happens that they become very famous, but still the messages they say will be, holy shit, like George Carlin, in the video that Irina gave us, George Carlin, the comedian, what he says is what he says. And it's true, like the speech is true, and that's what it is, and that's the reality. And yet he's able to go on tours and do comedy. You know, he's able to continue to manifest and self-actualize in ways as a person. But he knows the reality is we are gone and we are on the wrong path, and the earth is going to take care of that. That's pretty much what he says. And he's got a lot of followers. But as time passes and reality hits us in the face more and more, even comedians like him wouldn't be selling out shows anymore, because reality is getting closer and people that talk about it will become more unpopular. It's not going to be funny anymore.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Anyway, I have to go now. Soon the battery is off. So
thanks for bringing
bye
nature
bye.
into this triad.
Yeah, that's good. Bye bye.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, stop the recording. Yeah, bye.
Okay, thank you, Irina. Okay, I'm going to end the recording now. Okay.